Today we're talking about the food I'm gonna grow this year. Let's go. Hey friends, this is Kendall, your joyful farmer. And this is Luke. He loves me. So I grow a pretty big garden here in North Texas in a tiny town north of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And we're in zone 8A, 8B, kind of on the border there. So over the past several years, I've been growing a pretty big food garden. Last year we grew on half an acre and grew primarily food. This next year, we are going to grow primarily flowers out in the big garden, and we added this high tunnel this year. So the plan is for me to have a really concentrated effort in here, growing our food and trialing some flowers here and there in here as well. It's about 20 degrees outside today and it's 70 degrees in here, so I'm choosing to be in the high tunnel today. And so what I figured out over the past several years are the varieties that do really well here in North Texas, at least in my area, and the ones that are super productive but also really delicious. So I have a lot of recommendations for you today. I also have some varieties that we are going to trial for the first time this year, and because all of our food efforts are going to be concentrated in the high tunnel, I'm having to be very particular in what I choose to grow out here. So I'm only choosing my very favorites or the best of the best, and I want to share those varieties with you today. All right, so let's get into my list. It's pretty much in alphabetical order so you can follow along, and I'll put lots of pictures up on the screen so you can see what they look like. The first thing is beans. So there are bush beans, pole beans, and yard-long beans that we grow. For bush beans, I've found that I really like at least one bean that is a purple or a dark red. I don't know if they taste better, but for the novelty of it, it's so much fun. They're purple, and then when you cook them, they change color to green. It's kind of magical. So the one that I found has worked best for us so far is the amethyst bush bean, and it's from Johnny's. There is the compass bush bean that we tried last year that I really liked. The compass bush bean was really productive, and it had very thin, kind of fine green beans. So they were really delicious, and there were tons of them coming off of these plants last year. The dragon tongue bush bean I like for the novelty of it. It's just a really fun plant to grow because these beans are kind of white and they have purple stripes, but they do taste good. They're really productive in the heat, so that's great. This year I'm gonna try a bush bean that is from Johnny's that is called Provider. So the reason I'm planting these Provider bush beans this year is that they are touted by Johnny's as being something that you can plant earlier and get harvest from earlier. They tolerate cool soils better than other green beans. A lot of times in the past, I've had issues with germination in trying to sow my beans, direct sow my bush beans outside. If the soil is too cool, they have trouble germinating well, and then I lose a lot of seeds. So I'm excited about this one and trying it to see how early I can get good germination from these green bean seeds. And I'm hoping this will be enough seeds. Now, it says on the Johnny's website that they are compact plants, easy to grow, adaptable to diverse soil and climate conditions, and produce 5.5-inch fleshy round pod green beans. So a classic green bean, and hopefully will produce really well for us this year. I also do like to grow pole beans. So bush beans grow in compact plants, and they tend to have a flush of beans at once that you can harvest, and they'll do that every couple of weeks depending on the variety that you get. Pole beans will actually climb a trellis for you and will produce more consistently, and you can go out and pick beans weekly, so they produce a smaller amount over a longer period of time, and they'll continue growing all spring really. Then there are long beans or noodle beans. I love noodle beans because they grow through the summer in the heat, but we grow the red noodle beans and then just a standard yard long green bean, and they both do really well. We love those. Beets. I love beets. So when it comes to beets, I like red beets myself, but not everybody is a fan of the earthy flavor of beets. So I have found a couple of other beets that I really love growing for the flavor, because they're a little sweeter and a little milder. So for a red beet, I just like the Detroit dark red beet. I feel like they've always produced well, and they're very predictable and uniform roots, really nice and easy to grow. And for a milder beet, I really like the Detroit golden beet. So golden beets, I just think are the most delicious thing in the world. I don't know if it's because of their beautiful color or because they're just sweeter and milder, but I love golden beets. So I will not be without them this year. Then there's also the Chioggia beet. So the Chioggia beet is milder as well, has a little bit different flavor. It's got red and white stripes on the inside. It kind of looks like peppermint or candy cane or something, but when you cook it, the red kind of disappears from the root. And they're really delicious and mild as well. So if you love beets, I would give those a try. And if you don't love beets, I would also give them a try. For carrots, I have grown lots of different varieties of carrots over the years, but the two that I've found that I think grow the best for us and are the sweetest are the Danvers carrot. It's just a really standard, easy to find variety of carrot. And the Purple Sun carrot, I believe I got that one from Johnny's, but those are really sweet as well. And they're purple on the outside, orange on the inside, really pretty, and just a really delicious carrot. For cucumbers this year, I will definitely have some Armenian cucumbers somewhere. I like the striped ones and the ones that are not striped. Armenian cucumbers are actually a serpentine melon. They're not actually in the cucumber family, but you can use them as cucumbers and they're super delicious. Armenian striped cucumbers have a little bit of fuzz on the outside of the skin, and the Armenian cucumbers that are more white colored or really, really light green, they don't have as much of that, just really slight fuzz. But they're both really delicious and do really well through the heat. So those are definitely some you might want to try. There are a few cucumbers I'm going to trial in the high tunnel this year, and they are from Johnny's. One is the H19 Little Leaf. It says reliable yields on a uniquely compact plant, blocky medium length 3 to 5 inch fruits, good for fresh eating that pickle well. But the reason I chose this pickling cucumber for the high tunnel is that it is parthenocarpic, which just means that it doesn't require pollinators for it to produce fruit. And they're supposed to yield well even under stress. So I'm hoping that a small plant that produces well will do well in the high tunnel and give us lots of cucumbers this year. Another parthenocarpic variety that I'm trying this year from Johnny's is called Gershwin. It's supposed to be an extra early cucumber, so shorter days to harvest. And it is gynoecious and parthenocarpic. Gynoecious just meaning that it has many female flowers that it produces, and it produces over a shorter period, so it's more of a determinate variety of cucumber. Another variety of cucumber that I'm trying this year in the high tunnel is from Johnny's, and it's called Excelsior, and it's another gynoecious and parthenocarpic variety. It's supposed to have really high yields and high disease resistance. One other cucumber that I'm going to have to find space for somewhere outside is the silver slicer cucumber. It is delicious and crunchy and sweet, and it's a great cucumber. I grew them kind of late in the season last year and didn't get as many of them, and I wished I had planted them sooner. I will find a place for them somewhere. Next we have kale. I love to grow kale. I've grown kale forever. I've always been fond of blue curly kale. It grows really well. It's a little bit harder to wash blue curly kale just because it's got lots of little ridges and curls, but it's great and it grows through our hot summers and survives. So it's crazy. I also really like red Russian kale. It's a little bit of a softer kale variety and a little bit different texture. And dino kale is probably my favorite kale. So dino kale or lacinato kale has really dark green leaves, and it's really flatter, easier to wash, easier to bundle, and It's just really great. There's a variety from Johnny's that I'm trying this year called Black Magic, and I'm just trying it because it's supposed to be a little bit more highly uniform for full-size production. So the leaves are supposed to be a little bit larger and all consistent in size. Next is melons. So for musk melons, if you're looking for a small personal-sized melon that's really sweet and really delicious, the Kajari melon or the Madhu Ras melon are both really good. So I love the Kajari melon. It's delicious and sweet and has green flesh on the inside. The cucumber beetles did a lot of damage to them last year, and I didn't get as many as I wanted. So I may have a few Kajari melon that I try out here in the tunnel and see if I can pollinate them by hand and get them to grow, because Kajari melon is delicious. There's also Madhu Ras melon, which is a really honey sweet melon that is a smaller personal sized melon, and it has orange flesh on the inside. My son loves Madhu Ras melons, and he had them in his garden last year by choice. For cantaloupes, there's the Hale's Best Jumbo Cantaloupe, which is a really standard cantaloupe variety. I'm still trying to get my hands on some Israeli cantaloupe seeds to try those, but the Hale's Best Jumbo Cantaloupe is good. For okra, I've grown to become a little bit more picky about okra over the years after growing so many varieties. The ones I love the best are the red burgundy okra. They're red, they're beautiful, but they're also really delicious, and they can grow a little bit longer pods without them getting too tough. And the Hill Country red okra is a little bit more of a fat, squatty, short okra, but it's really great as well. So there's also the Clemson spineless okra. That's a really common variety of okra, but I found that a lot of common varieties of things are standard because they're really good. They grow well and they're good, productive, tasty food. Next is peas. I don't grow a whole lot of English shelling peas, but I do grow snap peas, and we love snap peas. The sugar snap peas are probably our favorite. Sugar Ann was a good variety, and the Sugar Magnolia or Spring Blush, those are both varieties that have a little blush of pink on the side, and they also have really pretty pink blooms. So if you're looking for a lovely little snap pea that's delicious and really pretty, those would be great, the Sugar Magnolia or Spring Blush. Next is peppers. So I am not a huge fan of peppers. My father grows Superhot peppers, so I'll give you some of his recommendations as well. But the peppers that I'm gonna grow this year are an early jalapeno, which I love because you can get the fruit a little bit earlier. And the Jimmy Nardello pepper is one that I finally tried last year, and it is delicious. It's a longer red mild pepper, and it's delicious sauteed or blistered, and it's got a really great sweet flavor. So it may be one that you want to try. I will have that one in the high tunnel for sure this year. Habanero, I will have a couple of habanero plants. And my dad grows Superhots, like I was saying. So I got him to give me a list of his favorite Superhots that he grows. His list was about a dozen plants long. So I'll put it up on the screen for you. But I sort of asked him to whittle it down a little bit so that he could give me his top 5 Superhots for those of you that are interested in peppers that will burn your face off. My dad's top 5 favorites are the Carolina Reaper. He says it's the top of the heat scale and great for sauces and powders, great production. He loves the tails on these. They have a very interesting shape, super hot peppers. And they have pods with the longest tails that are the holy grail of chili growing. There's also the 7-pot brain strain red, which has beautiful wrinkled skin, top tier heat, and a very prolific producer, and a great sauce foundation, he said. Then there's the Primo Douglas cross, which is a chocolate cross with top tier heat and earthy tones common to chocolates, which are browns. And he uses those for sauces and powders, and he says it's the most prolific producer he's ever grown. Then there's the Bootla. So Bootla is ghost pepper and Douglas cross, Has gnarly red pods, a great sauce foundation, and very prolific producer with top tier heat. And was that 5? Nope, apparently I can't count. So the one I forgot was Devil's Brain. He says that one is very wrinkled, has carrot-shaped red pods with top-tier heat. Great flavor for sauces, his personal favorite Superhot, and a very prolific producer. Yep, that's all 5. And we'll try some of those in the high tunnel this year. Okay, next is potato. So I love to grow potatoes. I have some leftover potatoes from last spring that I'll actually plant this year, but the ones I plant are blue Adirondack and gold Yukon. Those are my 2 favorites. I also like red potatoes, but this year with limited space, I'll probably just grow those 2. The blue Adirondacks are fun to make purple mashed potatoes with. The kids love blue potatoes and they're colorful, so they have a little more nutrition in them. And gold Yukon is a potato that's really buttery and delicious tasting. For spinach, I found that the long-standing Bloomsdale spinach is one that will be slower to bolt, so it'll last a little longer into the spring than other spinaches for us here in our hot North Texas. And another variety of spinach that's not actually a spinach that I'm growing this year is called Purple Orac. It is, I brought the seed packet, but it's a purple, really cold tolerant green, but it survives really cold temperatures. And so I put some in the high tunnel too just a few weeks ago, and we'll see how that tastes. I don't know, it sounded interesting. And it's high in vitamins K, E, A, C, and the minerals iron and potassium. For squash, I've grown a lot of different squashes over the years. The ones that I like best and that seem to produce really well for me are the early prolific straight neck yellow. That one does produce really early and it's good. And scallop squash we really love around here. So I will grow a white scallop squash and a yellow scallop squash. The white scallop squash seems to be the best producer, but the yellow scallop squash is really delicious too. For zucchini, I haven't really found a zucchini variety that I love more than any other. The striped zucchini is really fun. Black Beauty is always good. The one I'm trying this year is called Dunja or Dunja. It's from Johnny's, and the reason I chose this one is that it sets fruit well with minimal pollinator activity. So I'm planning to try it out here in the high tunnel, and I will have to do probably a little bit of hand pollinating, but hopefully that will be a little more successful since it says minimal pollinator activity. So I don't know, we'll see. It says Dunja is a good choice for tunnel production. We'll try it. And it's got a lot of disease resistance as well. So for winter squash is not actually squash that you grow in the winter. It's squash that stores over winter. So a new variety I'm going to try this year that's new to me is the Delicata. It's supposed to be really sweet and a good producer and store well in the winter. Spaghetti squash, I always grow some sort of spaghetti squash. I'm not too picky about the variety there. And for pumpkins, I have some that I would like to make sure to grow this year are the Fairy Tale pumpkin, the Jarradale pumpkin, Valenciano, that one's a whiter pumpkin that's really pretty. And some little mini pumpkins I'm planning on growing are the Jackby little pumpkins and the Casparita pumpkins. They're just little mini orange and mini white pumpkins, and they're really cute and adorable, and you also can cook them and they're delicious too. Okay, next on my list is tomatoes. So I love tomatoes so much. There's such a wide variety of flavor profiles and sizes of tomato, and it's just a whole rabbit trail that you can go down with tomatoes. So I've definitely gone down the rabbit trail, and I've probably tried over 50 different varieties, and there's some that I know for sure I have to grow in the high tunnel this year, and there's a few that are new to me as well. So for my ultimate favorite all-time tomato, I would not be without this one in my garden, is the Dr. Weish's or Dr. Witchy's tomato. I think it's actually said Dr. Weish's, but I've said witchies so many times that it's hard to get past that. But it is a big yellow-orange tomato, and it's one that is meaty and fruity and citrusy. So it's almost like you're cutting open a mango. Not quite, but it's really mild and sweet, low acid. It's really delicious. Last year in my garden, I tested 10 different types of yellow and orange beefsteak tomatoes, and by far Dr. Weish's was the most productive and had the largest fruit for the least amount of pruning. I will forever have that tomato in my garden. A new one that I'm going to try this year in the high tunnel is called Harvest Moon. But sometimes heirlooms are a little bit more difficult to grow. So this Harvest Moon is an orange yellow tomato with little bits of red in it. Kind of reminds me of the big rainbow tomato as far as color goes, or the pineapple tomato. But it says it offers a sustained harvest with terrific fruit set all the way up the plant. It's a little more compact, and I can hopefully fit more in here in the high tunnel. It also has really high resistance to late blight. It says fewer defects and oversized fruits than the heirlooms it imitates. So one of the problems with heirloom tomatoes is that sometimes there are more defects or more cracking in them. So I'm hoping that this Harvest Moon will be a really productive plant in the high tunnel and be kind of a smaller version of a Dr. Witch's tomato. The next tomato is Purple Rain. So a Purple Rain tomato I found 2 years ago, and it's a smaller and more compact plant, and it has these flatter, darker red with purple tomatoes, and because it's a determinate or semi-determinate, I'll have to look and see, it produced more of those fruits at once. But those Purple Rain plants that I started 2 years ago, had them started in the greenhouse with all the other tomatoes, and I had an issue where I got sick for a week and I didn't go out and water them, and the only ones out there that were really left, and all of them had survived and looked just fine after not being watered and all the others fried, were these Purple Rain tomatoes. So I think that Purple Rain does a little bit better in the heat. I think the plants themselves don't mind heat as much as other plants. They still looked really good by the end of the season last year too, and the tomatoes were just really delicious. It was just a really nice balance between sweetness and acidity and a little bit of smokiness. For just a standard red tomato that I can get a little bit earlier in the season, I do like Early Girl. It grows really well and tolerates our Texas heat a little bit longer than some of the other indeterminate plants. So one tomato that I'm trying this year that's going to be new to me is this tomato called Moskvich from Johnny's. It's supposed to be, interestingly enough, a cold tolerant tomato, so I should be able to get extra early tomatoes from that. They're a deep red. Johnny says that they have a rich flavor, and they're smooth and globe shaped, 4 to 6 ounces. So hopefully just a tomato that I can get even earlier. I'm excited about that. I'm really excited about trying those Moskvich tomatoes a couple of different ways, maybe doing some winter sowing of some and starting some inside at different stages to see how they'll do out in the high tunnel and plant it out a little early. For paste tomatoes, I'm not really picky on paste tomatoes. I found that the Amish paste, the Roma, the San Marzano all produce really well in the spring for us. The Amish paste are a larger size tomato, but you don't get quite as many of them on a plant as you would a Roma or a San Marzano, but they're all good. For cherry tomatoes, I've really had to whittle down my list this year. I love cherry tomatoes. My kids love cherry tomatoes. But in the high tunnel, I'm gonna grow Sun Gold and Torrangina for some orange cherry tomatoes. Sun Gold is always good. It's a little more prone to cracking than the Torrangina. Torrangina is a hybrid that I found last year, and I have a few seeds left. I think Johnny is sold out of them right now, but Torrangina is a really great producer. It had lots of clusters of fruit on it last year, and they didn't crack when it rained or when there was inconsistent watering, which was really great. I also love black cherry tomatoes. They're a little more complex flavored than the red ones or the orange ones. Sun Gold and Torrangina are both really sweet tomatoes. Black cherry is sweet, but it's a little bit more complex and balanced in its flavor profile. Then there's Centiflor for red cherry tomatoes. I found last year that I really loved seeing the huge clusters of blooms and huge clusters of flowers on the Centiflor tomatoes, but those are little red ones. Oh, one cherry tomato that I'm gonna try this year, and I'm gonna have to get creative about where I put it in the high tunnel or how, is called Tidy Treats. It's an F1 hybrid, but it's a dwarf cherry tomato plant, so it's really compact, and it's supposed to be really high yielding. So even in the photo, it just looks like there's just clusters every so often on these tiny little branches, which is really cool. It says it has a polite growing habit. That's cute. Easily tamed with the use of standard tomato cages, and that's rare in a tomato. If you've ever tried growing tomatoes, you know tomato cages. That's just a joke because tomatoes will outgrow their cages really quickly. And it says only recommended for container growing, dwarf indeterminate. I don't know, so I'll try to get creative and figure out where to trial those in the high tunnel. So those are the tomatoes I'm gonna be primarily growing in the high tunnel. I'm gonna have some other varieties that I am going to plant just 1 to 2 plants of out here, just because I love them or I really want to try them this year. So there's Brandywine Red. I'll at least have 1 to 2 plants of those. Giant Belgium. It's just a really big fat beefsteak tomato that's red and meaty and delicious, and you can just cut a big thick slice to go on a tomato sandwich. That's a good one. There's Brandywine Pink and Brandywine Black. I love growing the Brandywine tomatoes, even though they don't last too long in their summer months as far as production. They're just really delicious. Rose tomato. I do like the pink tomatoes for their flavor. Some that I haven't tried yet that I'm just gonna try 1 to 2 plants of are the Hillbilly tomato. It's a bicolor tomato that's supposed to produce up to 3-pound tomatoes, so I'll have to remember to prune that one well so it makes a really big fruit for me. That one looks really good. Persimmon tomato, I'm gonna try that one from M.I. Gardner this year. A good slicing tomato that's low acid, looks like a persimmon. Thorborn's terracotta, I really love this one as well. Super delicious. Something I really like to do with my big beefsteak tomatoes is make a rainbow tomato sandwich. So I'll get 1 big giant yellow tomato, 1 big giant orange tomato, 1 big giant red one, and 1 more on the purple side or red and black side, and I will get a slice of each of those and stack it up in a tomato sandwich, and it's just so good. The Paul Robeson tomato, I do love this one. I'm gonna have a couple of these in the high tunnel this year, and for now that's all the tomatoes that I have planned for now. For watermelons, I've grown watermelons the past several years now, and you really can't beat a crimson sweet watermelon for the sweetness and flavor and how well it grows here in North Texas. So a crimson sweet is always good. Last year I found Jubilee was a really great producer and really big watermelon. So if you have family gathering or an event with friends that you need a giant watermelon, Jubilee is a really good one. Super sweet. And I'm still on the lookout for a yellow or orange watermelon that I love. I've been growing them for a few years, and I haven't found one that I've absolutely fallen in love with. above any of the others. I guess they've all been as equally delicious to me, and they've produced just fine. So this year I'm gonna try a new one, and that one is called Texas Golden, and it's from Baker Creek. Gonna give that one a try. Then for herbs, so for edible herbs, I love basil. I am a huge basil fan. I love to use basil for cooking, but also for tea. I love making pesto with basil and different flavors of tea. So for basil, I really love purple basils. There's a purple ruffles or the dark opal varieties. I love both of those, but I've found that purple basil makes the most delicious purple pesto. So even though the plants tend to kind of stay smaller in my experience, the flavor of that purple pesto is so good. So I'll definitely grow some purple basil. There's mammoth basil, or there's also lettuce leaf basil. Either one of those is really fun to grow because the leaves get really big. You can use them as a wrap, kind of like a sandwich wrap. Those are good. There's dwarf Greek basil, which is a globe basil. I love the tiny leaves of this basil, and it's so sweet and fragrant. It's really great for using in place of just an Italian basil in cooking, but it's really great for tea as well. I'll just take those little clusters of leaves and just throw them in hot water, or pour hot water over them in a jar, and just make a really delicious tea. And it's a little easier to handle those little clusters of leaves. I don't know, they seem to make the tea more concentrated. There is Thai basil, which I've really found goes well in curries. I've enjoyed growing that one. There's holy basil, or tulsi. That one makes a really delicious tea as well. Lemon basil and cinnamon basil also can make some really yummy teas as well. So this year, for a standard Genovese basil, I'm gonna try this Prospera Compact from Johnny's. It's part of their Prospera series, and it just looks like a really great quality basil that fits in a small space. The plants look really dense, and looks like it produces really high yields of good basil leaves. I will grow some mammoth dill this year. I will grow some cilantro, and there are varieties of cilantro that are more slow to bolt, which I may try this year. There's also chamomile. I love growing chamomile for tea. It volunteers and comes back every year. The variety that I have out in my garden is Wan, or I think that's how you say it in Polish, but I'll put that on the screen. I also grow some other edible herbs like parsley, cumin, tarragon, lemongrass. I don't really have varieties of seeds to recommend for those, but those I'm growing as well. I think that's all the food I'm growing this year. I'm sure that my list will grow as I get closer to planting things out and starting seeds. Luke and I are gonna head out and do some chores. I wish you joy on your gardening journey, and I'll see you next time.